Okay, well, as you can see, we are here. Kaiju Masterclass on Saturday continues, and I'm being joined right now by a longtime friend and a guy whose art has been uh, gracing comic book covers, book covers for the better part of 20 or 25 years, maybe more. This is my good friend, Bob Eggleton. Welcome,
Oh,
Bob.
hey, how are you?
Doing good, doing good. Great background when you got there, by the way.
Oh, that's fun. It was one of my covers for the IDW Godzilla. I kind of went wild and did a wraparound, and that was kind of fun to do. That was a fun time. That was a fun time doing those.
Well, it's funny because just in the spirit of like comic book covers, that's actually, I think, the first time I remembered ever seeing your work. I believe it was for um, the Dark Horse Comics, that
That's
manga
right.
adaptation of Godzilla
Yeah,
1985. You
yeah, and that
kind of
goes
did it.
back to 90. No, wait, earlier than that, maybe 1990. Yeah, 30 years ago. Oh my God, 30 years ago. And then I did something else for them in the mid 90s when they reignited things and they made a poster out of it and they used it for Godzilla issue 0, which was going to be a reprint of some of the stuff they'd done before, short stories that I think Art Adams did one and a few other people did some other things. And that was fun to do, but it led to some really good stuff, but even back then the approvals and dealing with the business end of it was so different. It was very different than it is now.
Sure. So you're saying that that particular piece of art kind of went back to 1990. That like your first real commercial Godzilla painting?
Yeah, it was. And I worked with Randy Stradley, who was working, he was the editor at Dark Horse,
Yeah.
and he calls me up, Bob, I want you to paint Godzilla for me. That's how Randy is. And so I did, and it was the whole book for the they had like a manga that they had done that they had, or actually what did it happen was, it wasn't the manga, sorry. It was a comic book adaptation, and I believe there was, God, was it the manga? The manga.
I think it was. It might have been because it was definitely It was definitely manga style,
Yeah, yeah,
and I was led to believe that it was kind of like a translation or like a just like that. It came out in Japan. It was an adaptation of Godzilla '84, but then
yeah,
was kind of the word bubbles were translated in English, if I have
exactly.
that correctly.
I think that's what it was. I think that's what it was. And because Mark Nelson originally did the cover art to them individually as comics. So, and then I got the compilation book. They wanted a painted cover, so that's what I did. And that was kind of a fun thing to do. And it was like, oh my God, wow, I get to do Godzilla. And then this followed up, whereas Randy, they had retained the Godzilla license, who at the time, and I'll go into a little bit of this, at the time, the licensing was done through United Productions of America, UPA, Henry G. Saperstein, who had he had like, what, 5 of the movies, and he was sort of like the Godzilla merchandising guy, and he would go around shows with Godzilla's agent or something on his badge or something, and all of the approvals had to go through them. So this was the guy that was trying to say, Godzilla should be green and all this kind of stuff. And then the other things where there was like, Toho would just get like sort of what he approved, and that was just contractual. That all changed in later years as we got into 1990. I did some work with Random House, and it was pretty much the same. Dealt with Godzilla's licensors, Henry Saperstein. And what it was, you had to, and it was funny because I had to send these, you send a sketch off, and these are back in the days of faxing things. We didn't have the internet, so we faxed, and we'd send this thing off, and he'd just say, okay, yeah, that sounds good, and then they really didn't. It wasn't a big deal. There was, and then when Toho took it over, in 97, I think his deal ran out with them, and this is going back to the 60s. Apparently his deal ran out, and Toho took things back, and they were doing it strictly to their LA office, and they were much more interesting to deal with. They were they were very much they very much had an idea what Godzilla looked like, and that was it. And
Didn't they
that's
sort of have like a Bible, so to speak, at the time about like things that you had to follow when, however you portrayed Godzilla? Because I believe that kind of came into play when TriStar started producing, or they were trying to get the first American production off the ground.
right. Sure.
So
Yeah.
do you kind of remember them having sort of like those guidelines, like you can only do this with Godzilla, he's got to look this way? I remember
Oh,
you saying something about like how there were only certain designs you could do for book covers.
yeah. They didn't want, and the approval director at the time, the guy we were working with, his name was Masaharu Ina, and he did not want that I was getting the vibe that I was getting. He didn't want Godzilla from 66 through the 70s. They didn't want that Godzilla. They didn't want to show that. They didn't want that. And it was like, because that Godzilla was seen as kind of comical and fun and a little bit anthropomorphized and humanistic a little bit. And what they were, the notes you would get, literally the notes you would get on something were, make him look fierce, with underlines, like fierce underlines, like that. And that was it. That was all they say. Make him look fierce, like
And
that.
that's not a bad mandate. I mean,
No, it isn't.
obviously, but
And that's all I cared about. And they were really, really, at that point, they were really into the 90s Godzilla. So it was okay to start using those designs and everything, because that's the look that they really wanted. That's what we had. That's really all we had. And then there was the fun. Oh boy, I did some merchandising for Godzilla 9098, the Roland Emmerich Godzilla.
Mhm.
Now, it was real interesting and a fun story. I got some fun stories.
Oh, by all means, tell it, please.
Anyway, what happened was that they said, well, as you know, let's go back to 97, 98. Ooh, we're gonna hide Godzilla's look. We don't want to we want to keep this a total mystery. Right. And it was kind of not hard to figure it out. Like, all you saw was a foot, or you saw the tail or whatever in the trailers and everything like that. And what had happened was the art department and director at Random House said, well, we had this emergency thing come up, and we need to have some Godzilla coloring books done and activity books for kids. And it was a lot of money. It was a nice bit of money, but the trick was I had to have it all done it was something like 150 drawings I needed in 3 weeks.
Oof.
Yeah. And that was a lot younger, and I was in my 30s, and I could stay up later at night. My eyes were a lot better.
Did you see the design of?
Aha. I'm getting to that. What I got in the mail was a bunch of photographs. And they said, here's your reference. Matthew Broderick, Hank Azaria, Matthew Broderick. Chrysler building trashed. Tugboat in the water, fishing boat in the water being dragged under. And I'm going, where's Godzilla? I can't, what do you want me to do with Godzilla? So they said, oh, that's secret. We can't show him to you. So I said, how do you expect me to do a coloring book with, anyway, what they sent along finally, and it was the editor she's very tenacious, very good. And she literally talked to Dean Devlin and said, this is what we need this stuff, so we need this right now. So then I had to sign by fax a whole bunch of papers saying essentially that I'd be killed if I revealed what it looked like. They didn't say that, but it was like they
basically said that.
They basically said, NDA, you will not reveal, blah, 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 blah.
We will sue you off this planet if you reveal this design.
You will be a grease spot. You will be a little grease spot. We will, Anyway, what they did was they sent me a FedEx thing, and I guess it was from Hollywood too, and it was a bunch of photocopies. And what it was the Patrick Tatopoulos maquette that he had made, the
sort
first,
of like in that pose kind of deal,
in that running pose, with the 1 foot up and one, like that. And he had 2 rows of spikes. He didn't have the 3. And they said, okay, the only change is that you've got to do is you got to make 3 rows of spikes rather than 2.
Oh, so it wasn't even a finished design.
It wasn't even a finished. It was a chunk out of it too. And this was apparently, it was done like, now just try to imagine. It's like somebody has, you put together resin kits and all that kind of stuff like that. Imagine like whoever took the pictures there's better pictures of amateur, you know, when we take pictures of our models and toys and everything, we do a better job. This thing was like laying on the table like criminal evidence. It was like, you know,
it was almost like somebody sent an intern in there with like a
exactly
a disposable camera. Hey, this guy needs pictures. Just take a picture, whatever you got.
Because one of the back fins was broken off the thing anyway, and this was apparently what was taken to Japan. I learned later, put on a table in front of the Toho boardroom, and said to the Toho board, "That's Godzilla. That's what we're going to do. And if you don't like it, we're not going to do the movie. And you can go. We're going to go away and have some drinks and have dinner in Tokyo. And we'll come back tomorrow. And you guys think about it." And that's what they did. And they said, you know, they said reluctantly, and I have that on very good authority. Reluctantly, they said yes, okay. And
funny because the story was that they were enthusiastic about it.
Well, they were enthusiastic, but it was from a point of view of like, I think this is my guess. This is my guess. It was not only the contract is going to run out the money, the money thing's going to run out, but the other problem I believed that was going on is that they were looking at trying to. They saw it as such a different creature that they could still save their own Godzilla, and he could still make a comeback as their Godzilla. And later on, this creature could be explained as maybe something else, which brings us to Final Wars, which is exactly what they did. And but the thing was, it was really funny when I got the pictures of it. I said, it's an iguana. I said it's a giant iguana that's running on. You know, it's an iguana that runs like I don't know, you can see this here, an Allosaurus.
Yeah, it was kind of disappearing on the virtual background.
But it's an iguana that runs like that. You know what I'm thinking?
I guess the idea was like they're trying to outdo. And if you remember that first trailer before Men in Black, it was kind of like the mandate was this is bigger and better than Jurassic Park, but then it ended up just being like kind of a pastiche of Jurassic Park,
exactly,
with the baby Godzillas at the end. So
there were all kinds of things that weren't even finished in the film that I was privy. There was a storyboarded sequence where Godzilla he camouflaged himself. Remember the running through the canyons of New York that in retrospect now, wow, you're looking at it going, my God, that looks really CG. It really looks like a video.
It does, but you know what? It is worth mentioning that there was a lot of craftsmanship in the miniatures that were kind of used as background plates. What I always found interesting was that I just never thought a lot of those buildings looked like New York City.
Right. They're kind of renter buildings or whatever, but
it looked more like Gotham City. That's kind of the impression I got, like when Godzilla was running through the buildings.
The story that was coming out was that Godzilla was originally supposed to be a guy in a suit, literally a guy who's on stilts.
Oh, and he was. There were shots where it was a guy in a suit.
It was clearly when he comes up, and there's another shot where he's a puppet and all that kind of stuff. It's very clear. But there was some situations, and what had happened was they'd run it by some Sony executives, and they're looking at it going, and this is when they were going to do the film more on a lower budget, like Independence Day, that kind of thing. And they said, this looks like a guy in a suit like that, and we want it to be Jurassic Park, or we want it. So they went back on a massive curve to do CG, and as a result, it was finished literally the week of its New York premiere. And there were some sequences that just had to be abandoned. One of which was where he camouflages himself as the buildings. He gets like the kind of the rows of windows and stuff. He does all that, and the helicopter's right there. And this thing, he just leaps out and grabs a helicopter, and it's like because they didn't even see him there. That stuff like that just had to be abandoned. And there was some other shots that they just weren't finished, and it was like, you know. So, but it was a big. Be that what it was, it didn't bomb. Everybody thinks, oh, it was a bomb. No, it didn't. It made $379 million worldwide, which in gross adjusted dollars is the exact same thing that Godzilla 2014 made. So
I think it was just more the idea of just the critical reception and just like the way that the creature was not really what people kind of remembered as being sort of their Godzilla. I think that's kind of what contributes to that. Perception, but
and the story, it took place in the rain, and you had the other big problem, that this was a problem for me, was that you had character actors trying to be serious. We're talking Kevin Dunn, we're talking Hank Azaria. And but mostly when you look at what they're in, they're mostly associated with comedy and not lighthearted, not necessarily comedy.
And not only that, I mean, you have 3 Simpsons actors that are in the movie. I mean, because Hank Azaria, I think Nancy Cartwright has a cameo, and Harry Shearer. So I mean, it's kind of like
what happened was that they kind of like it works when you do something like Airplane, where you have serious actors doing funny lines,
and they're not even remotely aware that the situation they're in is funny.
It's exactly. Straight. But it doesn't work when you have comedy actors trying to be serious, and that was sort of what they were attempting to do. And that struck me as what was really the heart of the movie's problem. Anyway, so moving from that, I got a lot of merchandising things out of that, and I finished the deal. I finished the coloring books, and we moved on from there. And it was like, yeah.
So around this time, you're working on the Dark Horse series as well, and did a lot of covers for that. And then you actually got to write and draw your own issue, the final issue of the Dark Horse. It was, I think, issue 16, right? It was that great cover of Godzilla with like sort of the T-Rex like right in front of him, and you got an interesting story about sort of where that storyline might have popped up later.
Yeah, and it was kind of funny. I broached the subject too. Well, it was a funny story. I said to Randy Stradley, I said, I've got this idea. Let's have Godzilla go backward in time. We don't explain why. He just goes into a time rift. You can do these things in science fiction. He winds up in the Cretaceous period, right before the meteor that's going to hit the Earth is going, and he has a fight with a monster that is from outer space that is eating dinosaurs, or it's attacking and eating dinosaurs as food. The two of them get in this fight. Then the meteor hits and the force of the explosion sends Godzilla back to our time. And I said, that's the basic gist of it. And it's a one-off kind of thing. And I said, and then he wakes up and he's got a piece of the creature. He's holding on to it going like, was it all a dream? It's kind of a, like an Italian horror film, was it all a dream? And then what happened was Randy loved the story. He said, oh, go ahead, write it. So then I penciled it, and Andrew Peapoy, who is a good friend of mine, he inked it, because that time I was really tired. I was super busy and very tired, so he inked it, and they colored it at Dark Horse, which turned out to be one of the highest selling issue of the series that they had, and that was kind of nice. It really did well.
Yeah.
And then later, let's see, when did that come out? It came out in '96.
Yeah, I remember I was in like 6th grade, and all I remember was that I kind of ruined the cover because I traced your artwork. That was like I was always trying to draw, because I just liked the way Godzilla looked on that cover, and I just was always trying to get them right. So I would literally put paper on and trace it, and then you get kind of the lines.
Matt Frank cites that issue as an inspiration too for him, which is kind of a thing to say. But anyway, what happened was I was in Mothra. Was it Mothra 3 came out?
Mothra 3.
When they stopped Godzilla and they did the Mothra franchise. Then, of course, I'm seeing this thing, reading about it. Mothra goes back in time to the Cretaceous period, and there's a 3-headed Cretaceous Ghidra that's eating dinosaurs, and she's gonna
just really quickly. As an aside, how great was that Cretaceous Ghidra design?
I loved it. It was really great. I mean, that's like, and that was Shinichi Wakasa. That, and
he had a great interview last night.
Oh, he's great. He's like my brother. He's a great guy. I love him. And he did this Cretaceous Ghidra, and I started seeing, well, let's just say how we all saw things. We saw the movie, as it were, and I'm watching it going, wait a minute.
Yeah, there's something familiar about this.
Yeah, I'm going, this is really interesting. So, flash forward. Finally, in 2002, I was in Toho in Japan, and I was meeting with it was great. It was just great because Shinichi Wakasa brought us there, and he said, okay, I'll go get Tomiyama. Oh my God, we're gonna meet the head of Toho. We're gonna meet the producer of these movies and everything, and really great. He's become a really good friend since, but at the time he was very businesslike and all that stuff. And there was somebody there, and I said, I did a comic book, and I brought it with me as kind of a gift, a presento. And I said, the story in this, I said, is a lot like what happened in Mothra 3. And I said, and then there's this kind of knowing grin that several people got, and they went, that was a really good story. We liked that story. And it was like, okay. And so, so I consider myself uncredited a writer of Mothra 3. But the thing was, it was like they could, because of Toho owns the property, they can do anything they want with it. They can take anything they want out of it. It's just their thing. You are working in their universe, and that's it, and it was fun. It was fun to see that kind of thing. And then there was, again, and that was when I was able to, 2002, that summer, they said.
I was going to ask you about that, because you kind of managed to get into a Godzilla movie that year.
Well, the funniest part, here's another funny story. I told the joke, what we called Godzilla 98, to some of the Shinichi Wakasa and some of the other Japanese when I was over there. I said, he's called Gino. I said, Godzilla in name only. I swear to God.
And by the way, that was Richard Pusateri who first coined that term. Richard, we're giving you credit. We're giving you credit on that.
Richard, we're giving you credit, Richard. And I told them that I have never seen any, like, Wakasa nearly drove off the road. He was laughing so hard. And then I told it to some others, and they were just that Japanese way where they're really trying to contain themselves laughing. They were like, they're just nodding their heads, just go, yeah, Godzilla and Gene. And then later on, I'm hearing, Gino, like that, so, oh boy, it caught on like that. But anyway, that summer they had, by then, 2000 and on, they had initiated their Godzilla series of movies again. And of course, Shinichi Wakasa was heavily involved in making the suits for it. And, this is like his pride and joy. He had to make Godzilla. He got to make Godzilla. Anyway, so he and I had become very dear friends at the time, because I did a painting for him. I did a painting for him of Godzilla versus Megaguirus, and he used it for a kind of he made his own product where he had a T-shirt, and he wanted his T-shirt design. So the painting to this day hangs in his office, which is nice. And then anyway, so I had I looked at what they were doing, and he showed me the shop and what he was doing and all this stuff. And they said, oh, we're doing this new movie, and it's going to have Mechagodzilla in it, and we're doing it this summer. And I said, really? And they said, yeah, well, why don't you come over for the filming? Like, mouth drops open like that, So I got to see not only the visual effects filming at Stage 9, but at earlier on, they said, would you be a guest? Would you be a running extra for us? And you got to have to go to Hakajima Water Park down in Yokohama. And
Bob, just for context, what time was this? In July that you did this?
Middle of July
in Japan, and it was a stand-in for May in Japan, right?
And it was like supposed to be May, and the humidity in if you've never been to Japan, the humidity midsummer Japan is like, it makes the worst humidity you've got here seem cool. Anyway, we were just drenched, so we had to wear.
The reason I asked that is because you had to dress like it was spring.
Yeah, and it was all of us. We all went down to. It was myself and Norman England and a few other people. We went down to Hakajima to do this thing, and it was really hot. I mean, it was really hot, and. We're in these jackets, so everything was a lot of waiting around, and then they'd say, okay, line up and starto, and then I think it was Norman went down and he asked, like, what, where should we really be if we actually expect to get in the film, because they shot 10 hours of footage for something like 5 to 10 seconds.
Yeah, and there is a very clear shot of Norman running past. Somebody gets out of a car.
His glasses, and he runs past, and I was just literally behind that. I was just literally behind it, but they cut me. However, there's one scene of me where you can see me running, and I'm just I'm kind of limping along, and everybody looks at it going, "Oh my God!"
You could tell you could see it's you. It's you back there.
Yeah, and I'm wearing a jacket, and I'm in long jeans and everything. So this is in about, and I would say the humidity and the temperature was almost something like about 115 Fahrenheit. It was really blazing hot, and we were given water, and they served us lunch, and it was a lot of waiting around. But at the end of the day, and that day, it was like my kingdom for a shower. I will do anything for, like that. We just had to go back on the train to Tokyo, and literally, I just quite literally fell in the shower, clothes and all, like, just because I said, I must have lost about 10 pounds that day just sweating it out. And it was an experience. And then for Christmas time, the film was done. And then the next day, it was kind of funny because at the filming, Tomiyama was there, and he says, "Oh, and I met Tezuka, the director. He's a great guy." And he basically said, if we knew you were coming, we'd make quick a scene for you, like that. I was like, "Oh, cool," like that. But whatever. Anyway, so I got invited around to the Stage 9 the next day to see the filming of the visual effects, and it was just wild. It was so old school, and so in this age of CGI, it was so great to see models, and the scene where you see Godzilla stepping on
the house.
The house.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a scene where it opens and he steps on the house, and the house goes boom, explodes. They had Tsutomu Kitagawa-san. They had him in the pants, just the pants only, the Godzilla pants only, stepping on shoe boxes to try and like rehearse like how he was going to bring his foot
and
down.
how high probably he had to get.
Exactly. And they had about a dozen shoe boxes. He was crushing each one, and then he had all of his ninjas, and he had all of his.
Because they only had one house, so they had to get it right.
They had one house beautifully constructed. It took a week to make it in miniature and build in explosive squibs into it so it would explode as his foot went down on it. And they filmed it from a tabletop where everybody was on the ground. Literally, the tabletop was maybe 3 feet off the ground, maybe less. And all of the cameraman, he was right down, like laying down, literally, in a sling of sorts, and he was looking up at this thing. And then they said, okay, Sardo, and here's the big moment. Godzilla, he comes in, brings his foot down, the thing blows up, and you hear pop, 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 pop. It's like firecrackers going off. And one of them hit me in the chest. A piece of the debris hit me hit me here, and it was kind of fun, interesting. And then and then they were like, "Oh, okay, great, we got it." And they ran over to see in the video playback if they got it right. And that's the big moment. Did they got? And Wakasa was explaining this to me. Oh, Tomiyama was too. He said this is the moment they want to see if they got it right, and because if otherwise if they didn't, it's back to the drawing board, and they've got to build the miniature again and do another week shooting and whatever. But what happened was they got it right, and then the guy that got up, who was the cameraman. He wound up looking like something out of a Warner Brothers cartoon. Like his hair was blown back with ashes and gray in it, because it was all kinds of stuff everywhere. His glasses were covered in ashes, and he took them off, and there's just 2 holes where like the flesh didn't, and his whole face is just gray and down the front. And he looks at me, and I just started laughing. He goes, "I was too close." But it was really amazing how real down in the trenches they get to do those films. And that really impressed me, is the craftsmanship and the old school filmmaking that dated back to the 1960s. It really did, with Tsuburaya's work. And it was kind of like, well, let's try this and see if it works. And there was no guarantee something was going to work. It was just, let's try it and see if it works, that kind of thing. And that's what you had with that kind of, it was in a relatively small crew. I mean, I'm not going to say it was like a huge amount, maybe a dozen people, but there was a lot going on, a lot of activity going on. And I mean, I got to see Kitagawa-san in the suit, and he would walk along, and he'd do something, and he'd hit a building, or he'd knock something over, and it was all choreographed. And then immediately, like within, he could be in it. He could be in the suit for like 15 minutes. because at one point they had the GMK suit in the storage room, and I tried putting my head inside of it, and I put my head inside of it. And you really have got to have like an endurance thing, because it's sensory deprivation, and they seal the actor in this thing, and it's just, then they got to get him out. They have like a team of like 6-7 guys who jump in, and they pull him out and get him some Gatorade or some, that kind of substance to get some fluids back into him, because it's very hot work. Yeah. It's very sweaty and very arduous. But it was nice seeing it all, and then at the same time, I did a drawing of the 4 Godzillas, and I gave it to Tomiyama, and it was in the Toho boardroom for the longest time. They had it right in the Toho boardroom, which was kind of nice.
Well, kind of circling back into the art aspect, because obviously sure. we got your virtual background, and I've always, to me, the mushroom cloud in Godzilla is great symbolism, and that's, you always have this kind of great take about Godzilla as a concept, and the concept of that evolves but still kind of stays basic with that symbolism of the nuclear bomb. So, we've seen, after Final Wars, we had 10 years of nothing. And then Legendary Pictures gets the rights, I think, in 2010. The movie goes into production in 2013. At the same time, Shin Godzilla is announced. And so between 2014, we have the Legendary Godzilla film comes out. It's one take on Godzilla. 2016, we get Shin Godzilla, completely like no take we've ever seen before on Godzilla. And then we have the anime trilogy, which has been, received. There are people who aren't into it. There's some people who do enjoy it. But Godzilla's so mainstream now. We've had, just in 5 or 6 years, we've had these very starkly different takes. So talk about Godzilla as a concept.
Okay, what it is, if you put like several artists in the room, and you said to them, draw your idea of Godzilla, don't make him based on any one sort of a movie or anything like that. You would say it's 6 artists. You'd have 6 different versions of Godzilla. But these are the only things you have to go by. He has to be atomic related. He's got to have 3 rows of spikes on his back. That's the biggie. That's a biggie with the merchandising I found, is he's got to have these 3 rows of spikes, and he's got to be atomic. He's got to have that sort of that atomic origin or atomic relation. And look at the Legendary Godzilla, which they kind of redid Godzilla's mythos as a kind of a protector of the earth in a kind of a de facto way. He wasn't exactly,
his origin is almost like the origin in Gigantus the Fire Monster, the Americanized version of Godzilla again.
Exactly, and that's what a lot of people compared it to, which is interesting. A lot of fans were saying, "Oh, it's a lot like Gigantus, isn't it?" Really insane.
With a little bit of Gamera Guardian of the Universe as well. A little bit of
Gamera as well, yeah. And I know that Gareth Edwards was talking about this, and he said that they did a big decision on this, because, as you remember, there was a Comic-Con trailer that showed Godzilla just as this atomic monster, and you just saw the smoke,
sort of like that hazy, and then he turns around and roars kind of deal.
That was when what's his name, director of The Mist,
Frank Darabont. Yeah,
Frank Darabont had written a treatment or a story or something like that, and that was much more of the, my understanding was, that was much more of the atomic horror that he is. And what had happened was, they had said, excuse me, they had said, Gareth Edwards got involved with it, and he got involved heavily with the script writing. And he said, well, we had to really make this decision to make him kind of the hero or the bad guy. And going back to 1998, that was the fault that they had there. They didn't really specify whether he was a good guy or a bad guy, And I think my personal opinion is, in 2014, they made the right decision on this, because in the end, you're going to cheer for Godzilla. You're going to love Godzilla. And I mean, it worked.
It's sort of the funny thing. We cheer for him whether he's a good guy or a bad guy.
Exactly. And and look at the end of Godzilla versus Destroyer. There's a scene in which, he's going through his meltdown, and the entire G-Force, Mickey and everybody, they all start crying. They're taking their hats off, and they're watching and this it's because even though he's a destroyer, he's destructive. It's the Japanese philosophy that he's a life form that is dying, and they have a great amount of respect for that kind of nature and that sort of thing, and that's sort of what was explored. Everybody knew that you're going to be rooting for Godzilla, whatever, and so I guess that's what they went with when creating this new one, and then of course because he's such a different thing, and you put different directors, different writers, different artists. They said they had a window of opportunity. Toho did, where they said, okay, we can make a Godzilla picture between Godzilla 1 and Godzilla King of the Monsters. So they decided, the separate production team, and Shinji Higuchi and Ano-san and people like that, they said, let's do this Shin Godzilla, which is the original Godzilla idea. And what you had there was a mutating, evolving creature that began as what appeared to be some kind of a frill shark or something like that, is what it's guessed at anyway. And it just mutates into this sort of it looks like at one point a kind of a weird chicken thing, and then it grows bigger and it gets bigger, and then it becomes more sort of saurian looking, and then it becomes this it changes so much that as a monster you don't know what to expect next from it. It's because it's changed. The mouth opens in a bottom way, and then it has a laser beam for a ray. And when he destroys, I mean, he really destroys. And so that's what I was thinking. You look at that, and visually speaking, from a painter's point of view, from an artist's point of view, Shin Godzilla is the most fun and interesting to paint, because he's just a mountain of texture.
There's so much going on with like the deep reds that are underneath, kind of like the charred
purple
skin.
When the that purple glow that comes up from him, and then you learn he glows purple because this is the Japanese color for death or something,
Well,
so
I heard it was supposed to be a tribute to Prince, like, because Prince had passed away,
right?
and
There is that.
So, well, it's funny that because you're mentioning kind of, I've always been fascinated with the technique of how a painting kind of comes to life, and just the way that you sort of, because I've seen your works in progress, and you sort of almost lay in, you just kind of lay in, like for instance, behind you, like the lighting, and you just kind of get that right, and then you kind of just almost work.
Right.
I guess that's a way. I don't know if every artist works that way, but I remember you distinctly saying one time that if you want to learn how to draw or paint Godzilla, learn how to draw or paint a tree. So
exactly.
Just tell us how, like, when you're conceptualizing a piece of artwork, just take us through that process.
Okay. Well, what happens is that I have to know where what Godzilla I'm using to begin with, and is it going to be sort of a postery look, or is it going to be kind of a narrative type illustration, or is it going to be a little bit of both? And when I start, I use a lot of my models and my toys as for lighting effects,
did Noriyoshi Arai a lot of times when he did the Heisei paintings.
Yeah. Arai is the best Godzilla artist in the world ever. And he's passed away, and he will always be. I want to bring Arai up. I got to see on that 2002 trip, I got to see Arai's paintings for real.
So you got to see just the canvases, and you just see his brush strokes. And that was always the thing that struck me about, even like when on the reproductions and the posters, you always saw the brush strokes. And that's like the one thing, and I'm certainly never going to, I'm not like disparaging digital art by any means, but just when you get to actually see, I think brush strokes are kind of like looking at music that's handwritten with a pencil. It's just you really get to see the living, breathing painting. So what was that?
I'm not against computer generated artwork. I think it looks great. I'm just not a computer tech guy, because everything is in a box. And here's the problem, the general problem with that is that when I do a painting, it's external. There it is. There's the painting. You put your hands on it. The power can go out. The lights come back on. You still have a painting. If that happens in your middle of a digital artwork, and it's not,
hopefully you have autosave on.
You're not having autosave on or whatever, or your computer fries or whatever, you're really up the creek. And that's my issue with it as a medium. But I am not against it. It's just I think some artists do great and wonderful digital
So
artwork.
you got to just see those original paintings, and
Yeah,
how big are those? How big are those canvases that he
the
used?
1984 Godzilla for Return of Godzilla, where he's above the city and he's got
Yeah.
like that's the size of like a door in your house.
Whew.
It was I would say it had to be about maybe 40 inches wide by something like 60 inches tall at least, and it was huge. Some of them were smaller. I recall, I think the Mecha Godzilla one was smaller. That was like maybe in the 30 by 40 range or a little bit smaller than that. But that was the big one. That was a big one. And there they all were. They were at the Okamoto Museum of Art. And we got to see the exhibition called Since Godzilla, which was really interesting because it shows the Japanese post-war and how everything paralleled, and the life of Godzilla paralleling Japanese technology and Japanese cultural events and things of this nature. And they had all of the original artwork there from it, and it was glorious to see. It was just glorious, and they're big acrylic paintings. Arai painted in a completely different way than I work, but when I paint, I do things, I build up. I start with I start layering, it's called. And what I do is the first thing you do is you start with your canvas, and I have to completely mess that canvas up. I take that canvas, you got a fear of the white canvas. And that Pablo Picasso said, the biggest fear in the world is the fear of a white canvas. So what do? You take paint and you just totally mess it up, and you get your shadows in, your areas in, and I usually do it in a warmer base. And then I build up and I build my details into that based on that. And then I do reflective lighting and things like that. And that's the stuff that really brings it to life, is you do unexpected lighting coming from, I mean, one of my great directors that is an inspiration for me and some of the coloring in my work is Mario Bava. He made a lot of movies in the 60s, Italian horror. He made the Planet of the Vampires, IK, the Demon Planet. And he did like, Black Sabbath and, Black Sunday and things like that. And what he would do was he had these innovative ways of putting lighting on something. Like all of a sudden there'd be like a red lighting on something to accentuate maybe an emotion or something. Somebody's like, ah, like that. And there'd be like a red lighting out of nowhere. And I sort of do the same thing with paintings. People say to me, where does your lighting come from on there? Where does your light come from on there? I'm like, well, it's kind of like a drama thing. It's just where I put it in, where it needs to be put in, and it gives it a sense of not only drama, but a sense of volume and dimension. Because when you have like one side lit, and you have the middle side darker, and another side lit with another entirely different, cooler lighting effect, then that's when the magic happens and it becomes three-dimensional and it pops. And you can see that on the painting right in back of me. You've got a warm lighting on one side, you got the cool blues on the front of Godzilla, and the whole background is kind of a warm, hot color. So it just really pops. It pops right out at you. And in fact, this cover was liked so much that a major comic book site picked it as like their cover of the month. They said this is like the cover of the month because they really liked it. IDW ended up reusing it for re-release of a trade paperback for Godzilla, and it was just fun. It was just a lot of fun to do, and it's one of my favorites of the Godzilla series of paintings I've done, it'll always be sort of a landmark piece for me in a sense. And I've got some other things I've done clearly, but that's the trick, is getting the lighting. And when you get the lighting, and all the kaiju films are like this, they have these really strange and unexpected lighting that comes out of nowhere. Especially, you look at the Gamera trilogy, or you look at they have these like unexpected lighting, and we don't care where it's coming from. It's a movie. It's supposed to be dramatic. It's supposed to be interesting. So therefore, the hot light could be coming from anything. It could be coming from a burning building. It could be coming from, anything. And that's all about the lighting. And Godzilla isn't any one color. He's sort of charcoal gray. He really is. He's charcoal gray.
Sometimes he's got tints of green, a lot of browns at times as well. In fact, I always heard that the original Godzilla suit was painted brown.
It was painted brown, and he was brown. He was brown. He was painted brown, and then they just had, of course, they shot it in black and white. But so many lobby cards tinted him green, and that was where the whole thing of him being green came from. What it also happened is that you look at the art that is, you look at Godzilla, and he has different kinds of when Yuji Kaida said this, we were talking about, he and I are very good friends, and
another fantastic artist.
Great, he's just terrific guy, and terrific artist, and he said that Godzilla is whatever color is reflected upon him, and that's true. And that's why he kind of maybe he looks best at nighttime or something like that, because you've got like all the reds on one side or the blues on the other side. And so, he's a kind of mysterious thing, but when you look at him up close, he's just kind of a smoky charcoal gray color, like in the daylight or whatever, or just looking at the suit, so you got to make that look interesting. And that's the trick. That's the trick to making Godzilla look really, really fierce and interesting is the different lighting effects on him. And that's how I go about it. And that's when I started painting. I build it up, and I work in either oils or acrylics, and mostly oils, but I work in acrylics too. But I build it up and build it up and build it up, and then literally sit the colors, on top of that build up, and I let the underpainting showing through, and this painting in back of me, there's some of the wreckage you can see in the background, everything, all that was just splashes of paint. And one of the artists that I'm inspired by in my own technique are the great matte painters of yesteryear, who did all these great matte paintings for movies. And when you got up close to those, they were nothing to them. They looked great. I mean, you remember the background painting for GMK of Hakone with Baragon coming out and all that. I saw that background painting at Toho, and Tomiyama was saying, take pictures, because they're going to paint right over it. And when you got up close to it, there was nothing to it. It was huge. It was absolutely gigantic. But it was these blobs and smears of paint just thrown in certain ways, and it looked great. It coalesced great when it went down on film, and it looked absolutely terrific on film. And that's how I like to work. If you get up close to something I've done, it's a whole bunch of little catches and tick marks and everything like that. But then when you stand back from it, that's when it pops, and that's what I hope for whenever I do my work like that. And
is a piece of art ever really finished?
No, it's just abandoned.
Like
both Picasso said that, and Bernie Wrightson, the artist, late Bernie Wrightson, said that after that too. That art is never finished; it's just abandoned, and you can only take it as far as you can before you overwork it, or it gets where it's the best you can do with something in a given situation. And I've done that many times on things where I've done a book cover, and it's like, I've done it, it looks nice, but it's the best I can do, because with the given material, with what I was given for material, may not have been that visual to begin with altogether. And so I had to do the best with it that I could. And the artist's job is to make it look better than it actually is. So whatever you're doing, a book cover or whatever it is, it's making it look better than it actually is. Some other nice things that have happened when I was working on the IDW series, I would get notes. I got a couple of notes from Toho Pictures, and they were like, this lady that was in charge of the approvals at the time, Miss Fukuda, her name was, if I remember recalling. She was great. She was very young, and she's a big fan, and she was like, "Oh, Bob, you did this great job. Oh, and IDW is telling me they're going, Toho never says, they never tell us things like that." So, and I was in Pen magazine. I had that was a funny experience. Pen magazine is a very, very big magazine in Japan. It's got like millions of readership. Anyway, I got an email out of the blue in 2014, right before the movie came out, the new movie, and it was a reporter and her photographer wanted to drive up from Brooklyn, New York, and they wanted to interview me. And this got back to me that my name was dropped to them by our friend Daniel Fitzpatrick, the late Daniel Fitzpatrick, unfortunately. He was, you want to talk to the guy that does Godzilla? Go get Bob Eggleton, and so they drove up and they took a lot of photographs of my studio and some of the paintings and stuff like that. And they interviewed me, and it was really interesting. And I had said something nice about Toho. I said, well, you know, they given this great icon that continues to this day, and here we have this great movie. Well, I got a note from them through IDW, and they said, you know, thank you so much for, you know, saying that. You know, I was like, well, that's kind of nice. It's kind of nice to hear that from, that they appreciate that kind of thing. And in Famous Monsters, that was a really interesting thing. Oh boy, that goes back to 2010. Before we even had this new movies series, I got an email out of the blue from Philip Kim, and he said, hi, you know, I got your name from a guy in who goes to Chiller. Chiller Theater is sort of the wellspring of a lot of really interesting folks. And I said, from who? I think his name's Philip I. And I went, oh yeah, I know him. And he was at San Diego Comic-Con, and he kept on saying, you got to get Bob Eggleton to do covers for you. You got to get Bob Eggleton to do covers for you. Well, they finally got in touch with me, and we did. Phil had bought Lock, Stock, and Barrel. He bought the whole Famous Monsters thing. It's a very long story. I'm not going to get into it. No, but it's, yeah. Anyway, so he said, well, looking back, they looked at what issues sold really, really well. And issue 114 from 1975 sold something like 500,000 copies. It sold a huge amount, and then in the aftermarket they sold out of it and everything. And it was remember, it was a big thick reprints of all of every Godzilla article from Monster World of Famous Monsters up to that point, and a few new things. And anyway, you know, Phil said, you know, I'd like you to do some art for me, and you know, so we came to an agreement on things. And then we decided, let's do this kaiju issue. And August Ragone was going to come in, and he was guest editing it. And, you know, and we got a whole bunch of stuff. And at that point, to be very frank about it, Phil had restarted Famous Monsters in 2010. And of course, the world had changed in the world of magazines. People were getting things on the internet, and they were, you know, instead of 30,000 copies or 40,000 copies of an issue selling 5,000, right? You know what I mean? And so he was getting these kind of lingering sales. And then we did this issue with Godzilla, and it really did phenomenal. It did great in sales, and I think they did a reprint on.
Yeah, and I remember they kept rolling them forward. It almost became like an annual thing with the
yeah,
issues.
And so he said, okay, we're going to do a kaiju issue every single year, and we already do the covers. We want, you know, August and you involved with it, and then the last one was the one I did was King Kong versus Godzilla, and that's when they had a new editor, and he was the former editor of Entertainment Weekly, nice, great guy. And I think Steve Rifle did the article for that. I think he did the article, and it was King Kong versus Godzilla. And that was the last time we did anything with, that. And of course, Famous Monsters has since folded. And it's just, you know, it's not a matter of, it's just that time for magazines is very, very tough right now because
sure.
off the internet. And a lot of people don't like the actual physical things, and we do. I mean, I always loved Famous Monsters as a magazine and just collecting it and stuff like that. So it was nice to be part of it. I did a bunch of covers, and I'm like either number 2 or number 3 cover artist, as in Basil Gogos, I think, was number 1, and of course, you know, he would be, and he's a legend. But I'm right up there too, which is nice. And
that is nice.
And it was nice having my childhood come back in that full circle kind of way like that, where I'm doing Godzilla and I'm saying, wow, you know, I'm you know, people saying, where's Godzilla ever going to get you when you're what you going to do for a living? You know, you can't paint Godzilla. And it's like, well, that's what I'm doing. You know, I was able to say that in the mid 2000s, the 2010s, I was able to really do that. So
one thing that I definitely wanted to ask you here, as we are kind of running up on
sure.
the end of our session, is you had an interesting story that you told once about the quickest turnaround time you ever had on a Godzilla cover painting. I think it was for a Dark Horse issue. I always thought that was an interesting story. Can you quickly kind of
they were doing a series of Godzilla books, and Greg Koch what's his name? Alex Cox, not Greg Cox. Alex Cox, the director of Repo Man, was writing it. And, you know, of course, Alex is you know, he's a big Godzilla fanatic and all that stuff. And he was writing it. And the artists they had involved, I don't know names, but the artists they had involved, he just couldn't get deadlines done on other stuff done. And so Randy Stradley called me up again. This was in 1995. He called me up again, and he's like, you know, Randy was like, "Hey Bob, it's Randy." That's how Randy would talk. And he'd say, "I got this problem. I've got these Godzilla series, and it's 4 covers, and you know, I'm giving them to you. I'm taking somebody off these, and I'm giving them to you. But I get the problem. The first one is the problem. We really need it by the day after tomorrow." So
and that wasn't even like an exaggeration. That was literally, you had like a day.
It was Tuesday, and they needed it like Thursday, or they needed it. I think the latest I could get it to them was Friday. Anyway, what happened was I said, okay, I nutted out an idea, and I said, look, let's just do a nice portrait of him. Let's just do a nice portrait. So I got my books and all kinds of stuff out. Did a nice straightforward portrait of I think it was the 19.
It looked like the 92 Godzilla, if I remember.
Yeah, this straight on portrait of him with that lighting effects that I would do with like the blue and the red and all that kind of stuff. And it was roughly maybe 14 by 18 in size, a very small piece. And I did it and spent a lot of hours like on that day. I just went right into it. And Randy said, we're not even going to go for like a sketch approval. We're just going to like do this and tell them we absolutely have to have something done. And they approved it. They liked it. And so I got the remaining covers in the series to do, which was nice to do. And that was a little more saner. I had a little more, they were by the month, which is a lot saner to work on. But it was the first one that was really, I had to pull that thing together, and I did it in a day, got it to, this is how low tech it was. So we just didn't have the internet. You couldn't stream or send things through. You couldn't hightail files. You couldn't do any of that. So I went down to my photographer, get a transparency made of it. And they shot they shot that. And then literally on the way back, I stopped at FedEx and overnighted it to Dark Horse Comics on Oregon. And Randy got it the next morning. They got it in. They got it through. They made the previews deadline because it had to be for like Diamond previews or something like that. So they made the previews deadline, and then from then on, I did a bunch of other stuff with them too, which was nice. And that was, so I'm part of the second wave of Godzilla comics, not the Marvel wave, which was the first one, but the second wave, and then of course part of the third wave, which was IDW.
Well, and I think that's a really great way to kind of get to the end of our segment here.
Cool.
Bob, it was obviously great to have you on and great to talk to you. And just for everybody that's kind of tuning in right now, right after this, we're going to have Sean Lincoln back and Ed Godzicheski talking about posters and promotion in kaiju films. So that kind of has a little bit of a connection, obviously, to the artwork, because the artwork is oftentimes, more often than not, used obviously in promotion of these films as well. So
I did a poster for a Godzilla Film Festival for our friend Kyle Yount, and he was working out in Oregon at the time. He's working.
And by the way, that poster session will be moderated by Kyle.
And Kyle could tell you more fun stories on that than I could. And I did it for him. I really helped him out. I really bent over to help, because he's a great guy, and I wanted to help him out. He did this great poster, and like the deal was, he'd say, and then he sent me something like 100 copies of it or something like that. And it was, he could tell you more fun stories on that whole thing, because there was some, well, let's just say there was some confusion as to the people we did it for, and this sort of thing. And it was kind of who was supposed to own it was my original painting, and that was the end of the story. And who was supposed to own the original, all that stuff. And I said, well, you're not, and nobody gets it but it wasn't to do with Kyle's, who the theater, apparently, if I remember correctly.
All right. Well, Bob,
Oh,
again,
great.
thank you so much for joining us and kind of talking about the philosophy of not just Godzilla art, but Godzilla in general. It's
Yeah,
always fun to just kind of sit and discuss that, and it really fits in well with what we're going for here at Kaiju Masterclass this weekend.
cool.
So I really want to thank you for your time, Bob.
Well, hope you
Obviously,
learn something. I can impart information, stuff like that. I'm around. You can follow me on Facebook, social media, things of that nature. And I'm still doing some Godzilla stuff, but it's more. I'm not as much. It is.
well, and we're going to be obviously with Kaiju Crescendo's.
Yes.
Reward season kind of coming to a close very soon. We're going to see another nice painting from you there too.
Yes, you are. You are.
So Bob, I think that's a nice way to end it, and
Great.
we're going to move on to our next session. But thank you so much for being here, and as always, man, it's a pleasure.
Take care. Take care. Thanks a lot. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you so much for the support and all of the kind words have been said over the years about my work. It's really fun to do. It's a fun thing.